All right, we should be running live. Excuse me.
You're listening to Composites Weekly, the leading news and information podcast of the composites industry. And now your host, Jonathan Taylor.
Welcome back to another episode of Composites Weekly. Today I've got Alex Blum. He is the CEO of Applied Bioplastics. He's going to be joining me to share a little more about their company. Plastic manufacturing represents about 4% of global CO2 emissions and is the fastest growing source of emissions, expected to grow by 15% by 2050. Currently, there are no viable alternatives that maintain equivalent levels of cost and functionality that work with standard manufacturing process. And that's where Applied Bioplastics come in. These guys have developed a unique technology that permanently bonds natural fiber and polymer to produce durable plastics for manufacturers. It is the first alternative to be cost competitive with commodity feedstocks and requires no charge to standard injection molding equipment. In other words, you don't need to change your process. Alex is going to be sharing a little more about their company, some of the technology behind that. And I'm excited to have him on. Alex, thanks for spending some time with us today. Excuse me, on Composites Weekly. I've got to clear my throat here.
No worries. Thanks so much for having us, Jonathan. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So Applied Bioplastics, we had a conversation last week. I'm excited about this because, as I mentioned, we've had guests on our show in the past talking about the future of bio-based composite materials and some of the potential there. And you guys have, I've watched your video. We've got your website streaming down at the bottom. But you guys have developed an interesting merge between cellulose and traditional polymers. So I want you to first of all, talk about the background of the company, and we'll get into some of the technology.
Certainly. So background of the company is kind of a longer story. So I'm going to try to make it as concise as possible here. So my background is in high-tech sales. I am the least educated member of my team. Pretty much everybody else has a PhD in chemistry or bioplastics, other things like that. I have a liberal arts degree. So, take everything awesome. I say on the technology with a grain of salt here. I don't want to represent myself as an expert, but let's talk about the background. So I spent a lot of time in sales. I'm here in Austin, Texas, home of high-tech sales now that Silicon Valley has kind of moved to Texas. In 2017, I was 27 years old. Had the best year of my life, ended up closing about $1.4 million worth of commissions worth of sales, which is like tens of millions of dollars in sales. And, ended up with awesome. $500,000 paycheck as a 27-year-old. And I had paid off my debts. I'd worked my way through college, so I didn't really have much of that. I count myself among the lucky millennials, right? And lucky and hardworking millennials, right? So, managed to pay everything off before this all happened. And I'm sitting there with a $500,000 check as a 27-year-old. I'm like, I've run for office twice at this point in my life. I'd run when I was 24 and 26, obviously unsuccessfully. Otherwise, you'd be calling me counselor. And I wouldn't be on this show.
Right.
But either way, it was really important to me to try to make a difference in my life. Obviously politics wasn't the way for me. But I realized I was like, debt-free, 27, living in Austin. In retrospect, I probably should have bought a house given real estate prices. But, instead, I decided to give away all $500,000 to charity. I figured, I'm probably going to be a salesman my whole life. There's not really much I'm going to do in terms of impact. This is a one opportunity I'm going to get, right? So I started looking for ways to get rid of that $500,000 and, realized that kind of money doesn't go very far in America. So I started looking beyond the border to see what I could do to help other people. And it just so happened that one of my college buddies was from Bangladesh. And this is really where our story starts. He said to me, it's really odd that you're looking to do humanitarian work right now because something really bad just happened in my country. 2 million people just crossed our borders looking for safety. And, I didn't know too much about it at the time, but this was the beginnings of the Rohingya genocide. in 2017. So, I took my $500,000. I flew over there to Bangladesh to see what I could do to stop this, and ended up making a documentary in the world's largest refugee camp. Gathered evidence on the on the genocide itself. Ended up submitting evidence to the International Criminal Court at The Hague, which was actually used to hold the leaders of Myanmar accountable. And most importantly, to in terms of getting other eyeballs on what was happening there, the film won a bunch of awards and got picked up by Amazon. So if you're curious, you can see it right now on Amazon. It's called Blossoms from Ash. It is a rental. I thank you in advance for your $2.75 rental fee. At this pace, Jonathan, I will pay off the money I spent on that movie in about 3,000 years, given the number of rentals. But anyway, regardless, it made the difference I was hoping to make. And most importantly, while I was in Bangladesh, I was introduced to a gentleman named Dr. Mubarak Ahmed Khan. Now, Dr. Khan, starting in the 70s, was a nuclear physicist. He was actually a chief nuclear physicist for Bangladesh, helped set up their first nuclear reactor, and then retired. Now, a little bit of history here. Bangladesh and India, were under the rule of the British in the 1800s. And,
Right.
As part of that shipping empire, Britain brought a plant called jute to Bangladesh. Now, jute is very high in cellulose. It's really useful for things like cloth, sails, sackcloth, rope. So you can see why the British were interested, right? After decolonization, this plant became, the primary export for parts of India and most of Bangladesh. But then nylon was invented. And all of us natural fiber composites people, I'm going to take a pause so that they can boo and hiss. Nylon, terrible for the environment, but it's much better at being cloth and rope than jute is. So it destroyed the market for jute. When Dr. Khan retired, he said, I really still think that jute and cellulose is useful, is viable as a feedstock for other things. And I really want to make this happen so that I can re-enrich my country of Bangladesh. Because when that export fell off, man, I mean, that really ruined that.
At Applied Bioplastics, we reduce the carbon footprint of durable plastic goods.
Let's start. There we go.
Good Lord, I sound nasal in that. I hope I don't sound that nasal here.
I had the volume turned down, so I didn't know you could hear it. So yeah. Sorry for the distraction there.
You're all good. So getting right back to the composites here, Dr. Khan said, look, cellulose is useful. I want to reinvigorate this export economy for Bangladesh. So I'm going to start researching jute and see what I can do to make something useful out of it. Right.
Yeah.
What he came up with was this. And if this looks like a couple layers of burlap in resin, that's because it's a couple layers of burlap in resin. Sure. The interesting thing about this, though, is that this sample in my hand is about 20 years old, and it's still shiny and new like the day it was made. This is a permanent bond between thermoset resins and natural fiber composites. This thing's going to last for about 70 years.
Wow.
Right. And it's about $1 a square foot. And I was like, holy hell. So sorry, let me back that up. So he invented this material. The local name for it is juten, as in like tin made out of jute. It also comes in a tin looking form factor here, with this thing here. Anyways, as you can see with the hole in it, it actually takes screws, which is interesting for a natural fiber composite and a thermoset. Anyways, so while I was in Bangladesh, I was making this movie. I was randomly introduced to Dr. Khan, and he invited me to his laboratory where he showed me this composite. And I said, this is amazing. Right. You've got a building material that costs you $1 square foot, has a minimal carbon footprint. It's mostly made out of natural fiber. Where's it deployed? I'd love to see it in action. Right. Like I want to see this thing in the field. Right. And he says, well, nowhere. And I said, well, that's fine. You probably just invented it. He's like, no, I invented it 20 years ago. And I'm sitting over here like tearing out my hair. I'm like, what's wrong with you, man? You've built this miracle material. And like, I mean, let me be clear. The bonding between natural fiber and oil-based polymers is kind of the holy grail of natural fiber chemistry, right? You're taking a non-polar and a polar material and you get them to permanently bond. Right. This reminds me of Iron Man 1, right? I don't know if you remember Iron Man 1, but
I do. My favorite.
Right? So Tony Stark builds the first Iron Man in a cave, right?
Yeah.
Obadiah Stane is screaming at his scientists because it's like, Tony Stark built this in a cave. And that's sort of how I feel about Dr. Khan. It was literally in his garage that he managed to make polar and non-polar materials bond permanently, right? And I'm like, how did all of these companies with all these massive research budgets not be able to beat what he did in a cave?
Right.
Right. Anyways, so long story short, man, I said, look, what's wrong with you? Why haven't you sold any of this? And he says, well, I'm a chemist, not a businessman. I said, well, I'm a businessman, not a chemist. Why don't we put two and two together here? Right.
Sure.
So he sold me the IP. He came to work for us. And the original intent of this company was to build refugee shelters out of this material, which, no power required, no water required, no specialized equipment required, is made by hand, and it uses agricultural waste, right? So, I thought this is a miracle, right? We're going to build millions of homes for refugees with this. But I took that material home. I went to the University of Texas at Austin's Material Science Department. Dr. Chen over there took a look at it, referred me to Dr. Lawrence Drizal, who's the Lifetime Achievement Award winner in biocomposites for automotive. And he said, Alex, I like what you have here, but it's useless outside of the one use case you were talking to me about.
Sure.
But like useless for manufacturing. You're not going to make any money off this, right? You're just going to, maybe you'll get to build some refugee houses, but really there's not much else you're going to get to do with this material. And I said, well, Dr. Drizal, what's going to make this useful? And he says, well, the problem that you have today is that you're using thermoset resins. And nobody really uses that, right? Like that's, maybe boat hulls, maybe a few things here and there, but like, where the real money is and where the real impact that you could make on the plastics market is if you could figure out how to make this work for injection molding, right? Because, hand layup method, heat press method, that's been around for a long time for composites of any sort, right? Profile extrusion, been using natural fiber composites for decades at this point, right? So you're not really anywhere closer than anybody else is, but with a little bit of work and a little bit of, funding and hope here, maybe we can translate what Dr. Khan has invented into something that could be injection moldable. Now, I knew nothing about injection molding. I knew nothing about the plastics market. So naively, I was just like, hell yeah, let's go do that. That should be easy, right? Well, here we are 5 years later. We just started commercializing our first products in August of 23. So it's been about 6 months. It took us 4.5 years to develop what we've developed. Dr. Khan was definitely the pioneer here, but I got to say, I blame Dr. Drizal for making me so optimistic about this. But we did it, right? We got it. And here's the thing about that Biophi is the brand name. And thank you for pulling up the product profile here. Look, so this is polypropylene, polyethylene. We're going to extend to ABS and a few other polymers over the next couple of years here. But, what we've done is we've taken a very high proportion of natural fiber. We've stuck it into polypropylene, polyethylene. And the result here is a polymer composite that behaves exactly like polypropylene, polyethylene homopolymer. It has a more limited set of use cases. Don't let me, fool you into thinking you can make like a polypro bag or something out of this, right? It's got natural fiber in it, right?
Right.
So there's some more limited use cases. We were talking about a $680 billion a year injection molding market. We probably address about 200 billion of that, right? So like only about a third of the market.
Sure.
Huge freaking market though, right?
Still significant. Yeah,
exactly. And I've gone far afield from the background here, so I'm gonna let you ask more questions, but long story short, we managed to translate Juten, or Better Board is what the international brand we call it, biothermoset resin board. We translated one into the other and now have this a tool set. To be clear, we do not make polymers. We make formulas. And what you were saying earlier is really the key part of our business is that, there's mistakes that biopolymer makers make. And there's the same three mistakes for the last, 25 years. And there's a reason so few of these companies have survived to today. And it's, number one, they believe that, if you make a more sustainable material, the market will adopt it. That's not true. It's just not. You have to be cheaper. It's not
it's cost. Yeah,
exactly. This is a commodities market. So nobody's going to, put themselves out to adopt something that's more sustainable. That's just the reality of the world. And secondly, I kind of think it's a little immoral to charge a green premium for things because, there's 6 billion people on this planet who cannot make a choice, right? They get what they get. It's a mono market, right? So if you say I'm going to go in here, I'm going to charge a green premium, you're cutting off 75% of the world from buying your product. I think it's not right, and it's not smart either. Right. So that's problem number one, is they assume people are going to pay more for a sustainable material. Second thing they're going to do is they're going to say, well, I need the big companies out there to start making my product. But the problem is I use custom machinery. Now, there's $500 billion worth of processing equipment out there for normal plastics today, right? How many of those people you think are going to be willing to trash those machines and buy new ones?
Absolutely.
None of them.
Huge capital investment to change over something like that.
Exactly. So the answer is zero. Zero people are going to switch over their super expensive equipment to adopt your new polymer just because it's more sustainable, right? And then the third mistake they make is they say, well, nobody's going to adopt our machines, so I'm going to build, own, and operate a factory. Well, here's the problem. Number one, factories are expensive, and investors are going to have to really shell out to build you that factory. If you're convincing enough of a founder to get folks to do that for you, I'm jealous of you. But the reality is it's going to take you a long time. And the second main reason why these companies fail when they get to this stage, this decision, is that they say, well, my margins look better, and I'm going to go build this factory. But the reality is that they're chemists. They're not factory runners. They're not process engineers. They're not safety engineers. So they run into compliance problems. They run into, duplicatability problems, right? Like scaling problems. There's so many problems with opening up your own facility. So we said, okay, this is why these three reasons, these are why biocomposite and bioplastic businesses fail. What do we do to get around that? And so what we've done is say, look, we're not going to make a single polymer that's more expensive than what's on the market today. We just don't. If we get through early testing on something and we realize the additive package is going to make it more expensive than the commodity, we drop the customer, right? We don't want them to pay more. It doesn't make sense to us. The second piece is every single one of our polymers is makeable in a standard twin screw extruder. There are no process changes required, no equipment changes required. All we got to do is send our engineer over to your facility, arrange your screw elements, and you're off. Like, you're ready to go. We provide you with the additive package, and we hook you up with the biomass supplier who is nearby to you to save on carbon, save on cost, and to help your local farmers by consuming their waste, right? So we hook up all that stuff for you. At the end of that day, where you've gotten your screw elements arranged, the additive package has arrived, and the biomass starts coming in, you can start making our stuff the very next day. Right. So it's a turnkey white glove solution here where you can, and so why would you want to do this, right? Cellulose is cheaper than plastic, my friend, by a lot. By about an order of magnitude.
It's plentiful too. There's like, what is 100 billion tons
it's
every
actually
year?
That's 2 trillion tons that the earth makes without human intervention every year, on top of what we make as waste.
Wow.
So you're not going to run out is the point. And one of the unique things about our technology is that we are fiber agnostic. There's 2 types of fiber we won't use. Everything else is fair game. We don't use marijuana for regulatory reasons. You can't ship that internationally. We do use hemp, of course, but you can't have that high THC content. Otherwise, we run into issues.
Right.
And the second one we don't use is sugar cane. The reason we don't use sugarcane is sucrose. A couple of problems with sucrose. One, really expensive to clean it out of the cellulose. And 2, if you don't do that very well, sucrose burns if you look at it wrong, right? And then your plastic smells like crap, right? So we don't want to touch that. Given that our unit economics are our strength, we don't want to add the process of cleaning sucrose into that process and adding more expense for our customers. So
I was reading you guys can actually use, plants like kudzu, which is, I don't know about your area, but you see it plentiful in my area because they brought it over, and it's all about helping with erosion but that stuff, you can't kill it. That stuff is just, it's like it spreads like wildfire everywhere.
It's Mother Earth's form of herpes here. It really is. But no, absolutely. You're totally right. As long as it's dried and ground to spec, we can use it in any other cellulosic material.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so that's the background. That's what we do.
So the process is, the biggest issue with cellulose is that it's not hydrophobic. But you have developed this process is basically making the surface of these cellulose fibers hydrophobic. So can you get into that, or is that, a lot of that is proprietary?
I can't get into the chemicals here, but I can get into the importance and really what we're doing here. So look, you had a guest on recently that was talking about pyrolysis and the fact that plastic is a necessary thing. And I agree, right? Like this is the best invention of mankind. If you talk about overall impact and whatnot. So, how do we make that better? And how we make that better is lightweighting it, reducing the CO2, getting that cellulose into that polymer and replacing as much of that oil-based polymer as is possible to do, right? So, what we're doing really is we're tricking the surface molecule of cellulose into thinking that it is polar, right?
Okay.
And so there's a chemical treatment process, there's a physical treatment process. It's sort of like shaving, right? Like you're trying to get like your nice soft skin, right? So what do you have to do? You got to cut off some things, right?
Sure.
You got to get some chemicals on there to lift the hairs so you can shave. I mean, I got to talk about this metaphorically because a lot of this stuff is trade secreted and not patented. Right. So
sure.
I got to be vague here, but long story short, what we're doing is we're changing the surface behavior, and the reason this works without hydrolysis or pyrolysis, and this is really important, Jonathan, because like I am such a huge fan of the bravery of so many other bioplastics businesses that say, I can do pyrolysis and pay $800 a metric ton for this pyrolysis, and I can go out there and compete with a polymer that costs $800 a metric ton. So I'm upside down the minute I finish my pyrolysis. I'm not even done making my polymer yet, but I'm going to go out there into the world with a higher unit cost in the commodity, and I'm gonna climb that hill. So I think they're super brave. I'm not that brave. We leave hydrolysis and pyrolysis out of our process because there's some really interesting chemical features of cellulose. Primarily the fact that it forms lattices with itself. Like it actually forms a weak atomic bond with its own material. So if you can disperse that cellulosic fiber evenly amongst your resin base, and just get kind of the ends to touch sort of thing, it'll form that weak atomic bond, which if you manage to kind of like extrapolate that out to the rest of the polymer, you end up with a reinforcing matrix of natural fiber. This makes your plastic stiffer, it makes your plastic stronger, and it makes your plastic cheaper, obviously. And so that's really the key there is using that biomimicry, taking what's already out there in nature. I mean, the reason trees stand up is that atomic bond between cellulose and cellulose. Now, I'm sure there are folks out there listening who deal with natural fiber. And I'm going to speak directly to them. You know that really annoying shit when cellulose clumps to itself and you got to like spend all that money breaking it up or like coating it with powders so that it doesn't re-clump and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's what like that really annoying feature of cellulose is actually what we're using to be successful here.
Right. Yeah. Can you talk about some specific, maybe some applications that you all have looked at with this material, with either the BioFi or the BT? You may have mentioned the BTT. What is it? The Better Board?
It's Better
you call
Board,
it the Better Board, or you just call it the BTTR?
Oh, definitely want the non-mouthful version. So Better Board is perfect. Yeah. We thought we were clever with that acronym.
No, I like that.
Biothermoset Resin Board.
Yeah.
So anyways, so I'll talk about both applications here. So look, like I said, natural fiber composites aren't new. Profile extrusion has been done for decades. But that's a big old nozzle, right? Like you're talking about a fence post that you're just profile extruding, right? Mm-hmm. So that's easy. Right. Clogging doesn't matter. None of that matters. But we're talking about injection molded. That's big. That's this big. Right. Yeah. So flowing through that tiny hole is a big part of our IP. Right. Like how to get, clumpy natural fiber mixed with resin through that tiny injection molding hole. But what that means in terms of application and use case is every bit of durable plastic on Earth that's injection molded could theoretically use our composites. Now, there are certain, physical properties that we haven't achieved. For instance, we're not going to be as strong as carbon fiber, in those highly engineered applications. What we're looking to do is not replace the highly engineered applications. We're not coming for you. If you're in the highly engineered space, guys, what we're coming for is really not anybody here in the composites world. We're going after the homopolymers. Right. Mm-hmm. We want to, as much as we want to partner with companies like Shell, BP, Exxon, all that kind of stuff, we're downstream of them. And really our job is to make sure that compounders are buying less of their material. We're taking their lunch money. right? Now they may not notice because they're shell, but but yeah, that's the goal there. And I'm so sorry. Can you repeat your question because it was interesting? I want to keep going on it.
No, just the applications for the two that we've got highlighted on the screen, the BioFi and the Better Board.
So what we've made so far is, trash cans, knife handles, sensor housings, light switches, outlet covers, RC cars, weirdly, but like, think about the durable plastic that's around you every day. Now, the reason we're not in automotive yet is because automotive takes 5 to 6 years for approvals, but
absolutely,
we're going for that, right? So,
right.
When people hear bioplastics, they typically think of the disposables out there, right? Like straws, cups, bags, and the like, single-use plastics. Number one, we refuse to make any single-use plastics, right? Even, the reason is we are still using oil-based polymer, which is going to last for hundreds of years, right? It doesn't make sense to take the most, the most durable and long-lasting material on Earth and make something that you're going to use for 30 seconds, like a straw, right? So we refuse to do that kind of work. But everything else, think about, you're driving in your car, drinking a Coca-Cola, you spill your Coca-Cola on your dashboard. If that's made out of bioplastic, you're going to have a hole in your car. You know what I mean? But with our stuff is actually durable, like the homopolymer. So you can spill anything you want on it in your car and it's going to be fine. So hard, durable plastic that's meant for long-term use cases. That is what we make at Applied Bioplastics on the BioFi side. Now, and again, to be clear, for all of you composites makers out there, all of you, compounders out there, what we are doing, what we're offering to you with these use cases, and trust me, we can do thousands and thousands of them. All you got to do is come to us, ask for a formulation. We will make you one. We'll walk through testing with you, and then we'll help you adopt it. The why of why you would do this isn't just a sustainability angle. It's that natural fiber is a lot cheaper. So we're offering you additional margin, right? Like, everybody knows that compounding is a low margin business. Most of my friends in compounding are telling me it's like 1% to 3% margins. We can extend that. We can extend that to 6% to 8%, in some cases 12%, right? So you're walking away with the exact same customer at the exact same volume, and you're quadrupling your profit margins as a business. That's what we are offering to this market, right? That's what we're bringing to you guys is come save money with us, sell that product to your customers at the exact same price, and they get to differentiate themselves because now what they're using is a lower carbon plastic. So everybody's winning in this chain. You're paying us for the IP. You're paying yourself from the additional margin that comes from purchasing natural fiber rather than plastic. And your customers are winning because they now get to offer a much lower CO2 product to the market, right? So everybody benefits except for the big homopolymer sellers, right, who are going to sell a little bit less plastic this year.
A little bit less.
Yeah. And as we scale, the funny thing is, man, I'm looking at my business model right now, and I'm seeing, maybe in 7 or 8 years we'll get 1% penetration of the market. That's going to turn me into a billionaire. But like, is that going to make a huge difference to the market? Probably not. It takes all of us, right? And I'm not saying I have the right answer for sustainability. I'm saying I have a answer for sustainability, and it takes all of us. So I don't want to discourage anybody out there. This isn't the end all be all for sustainable plastics. I think it's a really good idea. A lot of our customers think it's a really good idea. A lot of our investors think it's a really good idea. But don't let this discourage you from developing your own thing. We need all hands on deck to save this world. Right?
Oh, absolutely. And I would agree. I would say that every little bit obviously helps. You're doing your part as a company, and so
we're trying, man. And so with that thought, let me switch over to the Better Board product here, because it's a mono product, right? So we don't have to talk about 18 different categories of polymer or anything else like that. What I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, is if you can bring down the product screen, get both of us full screen, because I'm going to show you something.
Absolutely.
So
back out of this.
Going back to the founding of the company, like I said, what my goal was not to revolutionize the polymers industry. I wanted to build houses for refugees. That was what I set out to do. Well, really, I set out to make a movie about them. But eventually, I realized that we're not going to stop the genocide in Myanmar. We're not going to stop making people be racist, right? We're not going to stop China from developing an oil pipeline that goes through these people's ancestral land, which is why they got kicked out, right? I can't stop any of those things. But what I can do is I can help them and their communities have some dignity, for Christ's sake. Have some, some homes rather than a tent, which is what they've
Yeah.
been living in for the last 6 years. So I'm super honored to say that, 3 years ago, we finally got the attention of several NGOs in Bangladesh, and they allowed us to construct houses made out of this biomaterial for these people. And I'd like to show you one right now. This house is $1,200. Those people are real refugees. Thank you, Uber Eats, for the unintentional ad. But anyway, yeah. So that house
that's
right
incredible.
there, that's over 1,000 square feet and costs $1,200, and it sleeps 8. We got covered in Fast Company last year, or maybe the year prior, because we'd set these up, and Bangladesh got hit by 2 typhoons back to back. Everything around our housing got flattened because it was tents made out of bamboo and like sackcloth, right? Our stuff wasn't scratched. Like nothing happened to it, and it's also extremely fire resistant. We're working on a titanium oxide coating that will be photovoltaic, and we'll be able to generate energy in these refugee camps as a microgrid, house by house. Problem is, you can't put like a diesel generator in a refugee camp. The parts are too valuable, so they'll strip it down. It's also not the most sustainable option. You're burning diesel to power homes for 2 million people. Like that's not sustainable. That's not efficient, and it doesn't work at all. So we're building these microgrids on top of these houses. But here's the most important part, Jonathan, is that in my view, work gives dignity, and I think is really important. If you're a refugee, you spend a lot of your day sitting on your butt, and not to say, please don't think that I'm saying they're lazy. It's that they're allowed to work by the governments that are taking care of them. Because those governments are afraid that they'll take citizens' jobs, right? So why stick them there and refuse to allow them to help themselves instead of bringing them into the workforce of the nation and displacing other people's jobs? Why not give them something to do that benefits them within their own situation? So what we're doing is we're setting up manufacturing facilities for these folks, whether they're in refugee camps or just in really disadvantaged situations, where they can make this material out of their own agricultural waste. So we're providing jobs, composite making jobs. We're providing weaving jobs. People are going to take that agricultural waste, weave it into a cloth, or chop it, because there's you can do either one.
Of course.
And then lastly, more revenues for the local farmers, who are often quite poor, right? So you're getting 3 separate categories of people, composite makers, weavers, or choppers, and farmers, who are all benefiting financially from this. And then on top of that, you're producing housing for the most disadvantaged communities on earth. We're currently working on a proposal with a major NGO, where with $2 billion over the next 20 years, we're going to set up hundreds of facilities that make this material. We don't own any of this, by the way. We get paid a tiny licensing fee. We don't want to come in and disrupt these people's economy and remove money from it, right? So we're, few cents of, a house is what we're talking about making here.
Right.
And all of the economic benefit goes to them, right? And all of the housing goes to them. So with that $2 billion and that 20 years, if this proposal comes through in the next couple months here, we're going to build 700 million human beings worth of homes. And I don't know if you know this, Jonathan, but there's about 750 million displaced people on Earth today.
Yeah.
That's most of them, Jonathan, in 20 years. That's what Betterboard can do.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we do have that Fast Company article that you referenced. You guys are featured there, pulled up. We'll put a link on that on our show page, so everyone can check that out. Alex, man, it's been a pleasure. I wish we had more time, but it's been a pleasure having you on this morning. And I want to direct our listeners where they can learn more about you guys, appliedbioplastics.com. And I guess that's probably the best place to get started.
That is the best place, but listen, we are raising a round of financing right now. Obviously, can't talk too much about that, but if you're curious, if this is something you want to adopt, if this is something you want to invest in, if this is something you're just a little curious about and want to know, more about what we do, reach out to me at alex@appliedbioplastics.com. I'm happy to delete plenty of spam by doing that, but be interesting, and I'll come talk to you.
Absolutely. And we'll be posting the information on our show page once we get this out. Alex, it's been a pleasure, man. I'd love to follow up with you guys too. and and check on you. I wish you all the best of success for your company moving ahead. I think they've got a great CEO at the top, right? I mean, you're a hell of a salesman. So
thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Hey, have a great weekend.
All right. Thanks.
Hang tight there. I want to talk on the back end.
All right.